Hey class, welcome back. Lecture number 8, and this lecture is going to be on exclusivity, which is where we talk about how can there be just one true religion. I'm going to tell you a little more about my story later on in this class, but I grew up in church, and when I was 21 years old, I was given a book. And the book was entitled The Prodigal God. I have it on my bookshelf over there. And it was written by Timothy Keller, a pastor in Manhattan, New York. And it was a life-changing book. I'll tell you more about it later. But when I came across this book, I just looked up Timothy Keller and I started listening to his sermons. And they were so helpful for me as a 21-year-old. The first sermon that I ever listened to by Timothy Keller was the title, Exclusivity. And as soon as I was asked to teach this apologetics class, I went and dug up that sermon and I said, this is definitely something I'm going to be teaching in this class. Because it really is so relative to our culture today. Obviously, Timothy Keller is dealing with people in New York City, but no matter where you go in the world, it is pushed against that there is just one true religion. Right around the time that I first listened to that sermon, I was listening to an interview on TV. And a prominent pastor in the country was being interviewed, and the person interviewing the pastor said to him, "Do you believe that there's only one way to heaven?" And the Christian pastor said, "Yes, I believe that Jesus is the only way to heaven." And then the person interviewing the pastor looked at him and said, "So are you telling me that every other religion in the world, Muslims and Hindus and Buddhists, they're all going to hell?" And this pastor is put on the spot. What is he going to say? And the pastor reiterated. He said, "I believe Jesus is the only way to heaven." And there was this perplexity from the person interviewing. Like, how could you say that? There's only one way. And it's a very unpopular thing to say, and it's one of the reasons that many people are turned off to Christianity. But what I hope to do in this lecture is I hope to really show that every person has exclusive religious beliefs. Every person does. We've already talked in this class about the fact that there's 4,200 religions in the world. And it's not possible for all 4,200 to be correct, to be accurate. In the last lecture, we talked about this idea that what's right for me is right for me, and what's right for you is right for you. And it's just clearly illogical to say that the Hindu that believes in many gods, and the Christian who believes in one God, and the atheist who believes that there's no God are all correct. And then the idea comes up, well, maybe all of them hold portions of the truth. All of them are right in one sense. And that's really what we want to talk about today, because that's a really popular belief that's going on. I want to read to you a text from the scriptures. And it's from the Apostle John. We find this in 1 John chapter 4. And I'm going to read the first 10 verses because the Apostle John is talking about false prophets. This is what John writes. "Dear friends, do not believe everyone who claims to speak by the Spirit. You must test them to see if the Spirit they have comes from God. For there are many false prophets in the world. This is how we know if they have the Spirit of God. If a person claiming to be a prophet acknowledges that Jesus Christ came in a real body, that person has the Spirit of God. But if someone claims to be a prophet and does not acknowledge the truth about Jesus, that person is not from God. Such a person has the spirit of the Antichrist, which you heard is coming into the world and indeed is already here. But you belong to God, my dear children. You have already won a victory over those people because the spirit who lives in you is greater than the spirit who lives in the world. Those people belong to this world, so they speak of the world's viewpoint. And the world listens to them. But we belong to God, and those who know God listen to us. If they do not belong to God, they do not listen to us. That is how we know if someone has the spirit of truth or the spirit of deception. Dear friends, let us continue to love one another, for love comes from God. Anyone who loves is a child of God and knows God. But anyone who does not love does not know God, for God is love. God showed how much He loved us by sending His one and only Son into the world so that we might have eternal life through Him. This is real love. Not that we love God, but that He loved us and sent His Son as a sacrifice to take away our sins. If you were to ask someone what the main barrier to peace in the world is, many in our society would say religion. Many people would say that all of the wars and conflict and strife in the world are caused by religion. Therefore, if we can eliminate religion, if we can get rid of religion, we would finally have peace. Now, the first thing that we have to admit, even as a Christian, is that they're right. Religion can be extremely divisive. Wasn't it Jesus who said that He came into the world and the truth about Him would divide a father from a son, a mother from a daughter, sisters and brothers from each other? Indeed it does. Truth divides people. So it's not just that religion divides people, it's truth that divides people. And what I want to emphasize in this lecture is that yes, religion does divide people, but the solution is not to eliminate religion. The solution, as we'll talk about later, is which religion is the one that brings about harmony. Because I believe that that religion is true religion. I believe that that religion is the truth. And so that's what we need to look at. And unfortunately, even in our society, many sects of Christianity do not promote love and harmony. They're divisive. Religion often is propagated by moralism. And with moralism, with this idea that I am a good person and I am obeying all the commands of God, with that can bring about a superiority complex where I feel better about, I feel like I'm a better person than those lowly people that don't keep the rules like I do. Disdain for other religions, wanting them to be diminished, other religions, dehumanizing them. And then, because I've dehumanized other people and other religions, I'm okay with their suffering and even their violence. There is without a doubt that there have been people all across human history that have claimed to be Christians that said nothing when other people around the world, even right next to them, were suffering and dying because those people were of another faith. That is not the love of God. The love of God, as we'll talk about later towards the end of class, is one that desires that other people around them find out the truth And when they reject the truth, we still love them. We still interact with them. We want the well-being of those around us, even those that disagree with us. So, first of all, I want to talk about two strategies that don't work. And what we're talking about in this lecture is we're talking about how we can get peace in the world today. Okay, there's two strategies that won't work. The first one is calling for religion to weaken. This is very, very prevalent in China right now, but other places, and here, even here in America, while we have freedom of religion, it's being preached, it's being taught. We need to weaken religion. We need to push religion out of the public square. The irony is that when a government tries to stamp out or regulate religion, the religion flourishes even more. Why is that? Well, first of all, I want to say that all humans worship something. It is undeniably ingrained into us. We all worship something. The danger here is that there are spirits that are not of God. They enslave you. They fill you with pride, anger, and hatred. There are spirits in the world that we live in that are in the spiritual realm, and we cannot forget the spiritual realm. It is as real as the physical world we live in. Everyone worships something. Everyone worships someone. And here in our physical world, there are many, many people that are worshiping things that are not God. And anything that is not God that is worshipped is an idol. It's a false god. So the first strategy that won't work is calling for religion to weaken, because we all have a religious view. We all hold to a religious view. The second thing that will not work in regards to bringing about peace in the world is to confine religion to the private realm. This is so relative to us today in America. The strategy says all religions are equally valid. All religious views are equally valid. All religious views are equally valid paths to God. That way, you won't try to convert someone to your faith. Okay? Because religion, after all, is causing all of this fighting and war. And so what we're going to say is all of them make great points. You guys run off and play, and let's stop fighting. We're all right. Religion is good to give you strength in your private life, but never bring it out into the public square. Don't argue for values in a society that are particular to your religious belief. Now, there are quite a bit of problems with both of these views. Let's take each one at a time, and let's look at them. The first one, all religious views are equally valid paths to God. Okay, so let's take this assertion and let's talk about it. First of all, as Timothy Keller points out, this is a naked assertion. Now, what is a naked assertion? A naked assertion is a claim presented with no supporting evidence. Naked assertions are often phrased in such a way to sound informed, authoritative, and objective without actually providing any supporting argument. Tim Keller says, if someone says to you, all religious views are equally valid paths to God, ask them this question: why should I believe that? You will almost always get this sort of response. Quote, no one has the right to say that they have the truth. We all see in part. We all see pieces. And then they'll get out the illustration. And this is a very famous illustration. I've seen this illustration since I heard Tim Keller teach this 10 years ago. I've seen this illustration in blogs and essays and books 3 or 4 times. And this is the illustration. It's a very popular illustration amongst atheists. And it's about a group of blind men who come upon an elephant and grab a hold of it. Now, it's kind of a silly illustration, but the point of the illustration is to prove that all religions hold some portion of the truth, but no religion holds the whole truth. Okay, so that's the point of this analogy. So there's a group of blind men, and they're walking along together, and they stumble across an elephant. One of the blind men says, "It's long and flexible," because he grabs the trunk of the elephant. The next blind man says, No, it's short and stiff," because he grabs the leg of the elephant. The next one says, No, it's huge and flat, because he grabs the side of the elephant. They all begin to argue. But we know that in actuality, they are all right and they are all wrong. They all grasp part of reality. And so the illustration concludes. Religions are the same. Now here's the problem with that analogy. And I want you to think and see if you can guess what the problem with that analogy is. The only way you could know if none of the blind men had a grip on reality is if you could see the whole elephant. The only way you could tell the story is if you could see the whole elephant. The only way you could know that all religions hold part of reality is if you assume you can see all of the truth, which is the very thing you say no one has got. In the very first lecture, we talked about terms, and we talked about atheism and agnosticism. Atheism says there's no God. Agnosticism says we can't know. We can't know. And I told you in that first lecture that we would talk about this later in the class, and here we are. So there's a brilliant analogy that's been given by Christian apologists over the years, and it goes something like this. If I told you that nowhere in the universe did there exist a black onyx rock with white specks all over it, there's nowhere in the universe that this rock exists. I'm not saying that I've never seen one. I'm saying it doesn't exist. Now, if I were to tell you that about a black onyx rock with white specks all over it, what would that mean? That would mean that I, Scott Mercer, am all-knowing. That is about our universe. I have been to every place across the universe, and I know for a fact there is no such thing as a black onyx with white specks all over it. Now, what's the point? The point is, for someone to say, I don't know if there's a God, that's one thing. We would call that ignorance. We would call that naivety. We would call that they just don't know. But for someone to say there is no God, or for someone to say we can't know, that person is simply making an assertion, a naked assertion that they cannot prove, because they have not been to all places in the universe, and they have not proven that there's no God. They might think that there's no God, but they cannot prove it. It is true that you cannot prove the existence of God. And when I say you can't prove it, I mean to say in the tangible world that we live in, here is my iPad. I have found the iPad. This is proof that an iPad exists. We cannot pick up God and say, here is God. Now, I believe from the arguments we've made in this class from intelligent design to all the way to the moral law, I believe we can prove the existence of God just from creation, which is what the Psalms tell us. The heavens declare the glory of God. But no, I cannot prove that there's a God. But I believe it and I know it. And I know it based on all of the evidence that we have surrounding us. But for someone to say there is no God, that person has to say, I know that I hold the truth. So going back to what we're talking about here, when you say that no one should convert others to their view of reality, that is a view of reality that you seek others to convert to. The view that says we all hold portions of the truth, but none of you know the whole truth, that person is saying, I hold the whole truth. That's how I know that none of you hold the whole truth. Does that make sense to you? Okay, so it might take you a second to kind of chew on that and grasp the analogy that I'm giving you. But the analogy that I'm giving you is you couldn't possibly tell the story of the elephant unless you were there and saw. You weren't blind, and you saw all the blind men. That's how you could tell the story. You know the truth. And you can't go around telling other people you don't know the truth unless you do know the truth. So a person that says all the religions out there hold some of the truth but not all of the truth, that person, without even realizing it, is claiming to know all the truth. So that's the first problem, and it just doesn't work. All religious views are equally valid paths to God. Number two, keep your religious views private. Now, some may say it's fine to have a religious view, to have faith. But if it is brought into the public square, so to speak, it will cause bickering and fighting, so leave them home. Let's just find a common ground and agree on that to push forward as a society for the common good. Now, I want to bring into this conversation Mere Christianity, book number 3, chapter number 1. Go find it, underline it, highlight it, the ship analogy from C.S. Lewis. Let's talk about the ship analogy. So, there are two ways the human machine goes wrong. Number 1, humans colliding with other people. And number 2, inside of the human machine, inside of the individual. And C.S. Lewis gives us the analogy of a fleet of ships. Think of a fleet of ships. The only way they can get to their destination is if they sail in order without colliding with each other. And secondly, each ship itself is seaworthy. Okay, so we have a host of ships here. There's 50 ships, and we're all sailing together to our destination. There's two ways that we're going to get there safely. The first way is we can't crash into each other, right? Okay. The only way we won't crash into each other, though, is if our ship is seaworthy, is if our ship is working properly. You cannot have one without the other, C.S. Lewis says. If they keep colliding, they will not remain seaworthy. On the other hand, if their steering gears are out of order, they will not be able to avoid collisions. So you see what C.S. Lewis is saying there? Here we have 50 ships. We're all moving in the same direction. If I crash into you, and I keep crashing into people, my ship's going to go down. I'm not going to be seaworthy. But if my ship is not working properly, if there's something wrong with it, I'm going to crash into other people. Both are true, and both must maintain in order for us all to get there. I can't crash into you, and my ship has to be seaworthy. But there's one thing we have not taken into account, C.S. Lewis says. We have not asked where the fleet is trying to get to. Morality seems to be concerned with 3 things: fair play between individuals, tidying up the things inside each individual, and number 3, with the general purpose of human life as a whole. What purpose man was made for. What course the whole human race is on. Modern people are thinking about the first thing and forgetting the other two. So you'll hear people say something like this: well, it can't be wrong because it's not doing anyone else any harm. But this person is thinking about only the first thing. It doesn't matter what his ship looks like on the inside. It only matters that he's not banging into other people. But if we stop with the first, we are only deceiving ourselves. What is the good of telling the ships how to steer so as to avoid collision, if in fact they are such crazy old tubs that they cannot be steered at all? C.S. Lewis says. What is the good of drawing up rules for social behavior if we know that in fact our greed, cowardice, ill temper, and self-conceit are going to prevent us from keeping them? That's not to say we shouldn't think about the betterment of society. We must. But without courage and unselfishness, it'll not make a difference. And then this quote, I want you to pause the video and I want you to write this quote down. This is so important. You cannot make men good by law. And without good men, you cannot have a good society. You cannot make men good by law, and without good men, you cannot have a good society. This leads us to the truth that modern people don't want to talk about. Different beliefs about the universe lead to different behavior. Remember that religion involves a series of statements about facts which must be either true or false. In summary, we must think of each of these three relationships when discussing morality or social good. Number one, relationship between man and man. Number two, things inside of each man. And number three, relations between man and the powers that made him. It is impossible to leave your religious beliefs at the door when entering the public square. If you say, leave your religion at the door, what you really mean is, my individualistic views are right and yours are wrong. I can bring my modern views in, but leave your traditional views out. So, class, in closing, and this lecture has gone a little longer than the others, but it's so important. In closing, every person in the world has a religious view that they believe if everyone else adopted, the world would be a better place. Everybody has a set of exclusive beliefs. What matters? What matters is which set of religious beliefs can create harmony in the world. What matters is which set of religious beliefs are true. Some will say, let's talk about what our religions have in common. No, I want to stress how Christianity is not in common with other religions. At the close of this class, I want to bring up three things that separate Christianity from other religions. Number one, the origin of Jesus. In the text we read earlier in verse number 2, it talks about Jesus coming into the world, existing before he was born. That is different from every other religion, the fact that God became a human being. Number 2, the purpose of Jesus. He became flesh to redeem and renew the broken world. Christianity is about the restoration of the world, not the escape of it. This leads not just to the conversion of others to Christianity, but a desire for this world to prosper. Now, many Christians believe that heaven is in some faraway place, and someday we're going to leave this earth and go to heaven. But that contradicts Revelation chapter 21. I want to encourage you to do two things. First of all, I want to encourage you to go read Revelation 21. And second of all, I want to encourage you to go and watch the Bible Project video on heaven and earth. It's such a helpful video. If you took my spiritual formation class, most likely I assigned you to watch it. But Revelation 21 teaches us that God's intention is to once again dwell with man, just like he did in the Garden of Eden, where heaven, which is God's space, will come down with man's space, and the two will become one, where God will dwell with his people. Evil will be eradicated. That is to say, the heavens and earth will be transformed, just like our physical bodies, as we are resurrected from the grave. We will have transformed bodies. The earth will be transformed. It will be new, the new heavens and the new earth, or as the scriptures say, the new Jerusalem. But that will be right here. I don't know. Maybe we'll be living in Arkansas in the New Jerusalem. Who knows if it'll be called Arkansas, and who knows if it'll look like Arkansas. But heaven comes down, and God makes and restores this broken world that we live in. Evil is eradicated. All of those who have not followed Jesus, all of those who have not called upon his name and become children of God, unfortunately, those people will be eradicated, removed from God's new world, and sent to a place of eternal torment. This is what Christians believe. We talked about the origin of Jesus. We talked about the purpose of Jesus. Number 3, and lastly, the method of grace. This is what separates Christianity from all other religions, is this word called grace. In all other religions, you have to perform, which, by the way, leads to feeling superior to others, and it leads to divisiveness. In all other religions, you have to perform. But in verse number 10, we see that God came and suffered for those who were not lovely, to rescue them from suffering. Only this good news unites. Only the sacrificial death of Jesus. What is love? What does it look like? What does it look like? It looks like self-sacrifice. It looks like God becoming human and dying for those people that were lost, those people that were broken, those people whose sin had enslaved them. He came to set us free. He came to rescue us. This 5-letter word, grace, G-R-A-C-E, it is what separates Christianity from all other religions. These 3 features are what will restore the broken world. Christianity's exclusive beliefs are, I believe, the only hope for the world. They are what we call good news. Many people want us to take all that we have in common as far as different religions and formulate some plan to move forward as a society. And what I would argue is that it's what separates Christianity from the other religions. It's our differences. That is what will restore the broken world that we live in. And one day it will. When Jesus Christ returns, when he establishes his kingdom forever and ever, as he rules as king. Exclusivity. There's no other way to say this. Christianity is exclusive. It's also inclusive because it's available for whosoever will. It excludes all those who do not call upon the name of Jesus, and it includes all those who call upon the name of Jesus. I hope this was helpful to you, class. See you next time.